All right, welcome everybody to Introduction to Perl 6, or Christmas is finally here. The goal is to have a 1.0 release by the end of the year. Of course, the joke being that it would be done by Christmas, and they've been saying that for the last 15 years. So.
Where he announced that.
Oh, awesome! Yes, I actually watched the video.
Christmas, and
Yes.
there was no joke then.
Yeah.
And we were all like, really? That's fast.
So, basically, when I thought about doing a talk on Perl 6, which I decided now was the perfect time since we're in beta and we're almost there, could have shown you a whole bunch of cool new features, but I kind of felt like that would be maybe too alien. So I figured I'm going to start with how Perl 6 is similar to Perl 5. And then if you guys are interested in more talks on Perl 6, I'll go into the crazy stuff later. So let me know after this presentation whether or not you're interested in more of the same. But I will promise you now, it's not like it's going to be all Perl 6 all the time from here on out, because I still use Perl 5 on a day-to-day basis. So, okay. One of the differences in the way Perl 6 was developed is it's actually a specification. So Perl 6 is anything that passes the test suite. So if you decide that you want to go out and make your own Perl 6 implementation, there's nothing stopping you except your coding ability. So basically you can go out there, write your own, and as long as it passes the test suite, it's Perl 6. Perl 5 is an implementation. The specification came in the form of documentation of what already existed. You know, the implementation came first, then the documentation. So that's why you basically only have, I mean, sure, you've got Strawberry Perl and other things like that, but basically under the hood, they're all the same. You know, they're all Perl 5. So like I said, Perl 6 can have multiple implementations. And in fact, it already does. So the joke at the top I have to explain, because I'm assuming most people here don't speak Japanese. Basically, rakudo is comes from a Japanese word which, if pronounced slightly different, it either means way of the camel or paradise, depending on how you pronounce it. So anyways, Damien Conway came up with that, so thought it was appropriate. So rakudo is a compiler, and I stress a, because you could have more than one, for Perl 6. More VM is the virtual machine. It's right now the leading primary virtual machine. JVM is probably the second. It doesn't have quite as much up and working and implemented, but it does run on the JVM. There are others. Again, since it's a specification, but if you want to know the down and dirty details, there's the NQP I was talking about earlier. Then you can go to the website and have a look at that. Okay, Rakudo Star is basically Rakudo documentation and some modules, not every module that's been made for Perl 6, but basically the ones they felt were most important for people to be able to do useful things. So basically, there's a nice site out there that tells you how to get Rakudo Star and how to compile it on, basically on Windows, it's just an MSI. You can do it under Cygwin, OS X, and Linux, and basically it tells you step by step how to do it. It's really not that hard. The only trick I've found is occasionally things fail and you may have to wait a couple of days for somebody to fix the bug and then try it again. I've never had Perl 6 fail to compile, but I have had the modules fail to install because one of the modules fails a test, and probably because either a change was made to the module or a change was made to Perl 6, which broke the module. So, and then it took a day or two for somebody to go and fix it. And please feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Basically, what I did for this talk is I took my Perl 101, which I know a lot of you guys have already seen, some of you more than once, but I just basically took my Perl 101 and I translated it into Perl 6 because I figured what better way to show you the similarities than to just give you the basics of how to do the most basic things, just like I have in Perl 101. So basically, let's have a look at what we've got here. The shebang line is just for the env. It picks where Perl is set up in your Perl 6 is set up in your environment. Obviously, later once they release it, it'll sit in user bin or user local bin or wherever, some standardized place. So the use v6 tells the compiler, hey, this is Perl 6 code coming up. And then if you look at line 5, that looks pretty much like Perl 5, not much different going on there. So basically, for those of you who have never used say, even though say is actually in Perl 5 as well, that's one thing too that I know Perl 6 has taken 15 years, but something else I neglected to talk about before the talk was a lot of the things, ideas that came out of Perl 6 got backported into Perl 5. So it wasn't like it was completely unproductive until this year when they release it. There was a whole lot of stuff that has gone into Perl 5 as new features that were originally thought up in Perl 6. So say basically is just like print, only it automatically puts a new line in for you. So basically line 7 does interpolation, just like you're used to with Perl 5. What's nice is you don't even need a data dumper anymore. If you just say the variable dot, now obviously the arrow has gone away, so no longer an arrow because Larry decided that the rest of the world had decided that the way to invoke a method was with a dot. So he was like, okay, we're gonna do it the way everybody else does it. So if you just say variable dot Perl, it gives you literally the Perl, just like data dumper does in Perl 5. So $bar.what, all capital, gives you what that thing actually is. And then again, I'm just showing you some interpolation on line 11. But what I wanted to show here is now if you just put curly braces around something in a string, you can interpolate anything. Any Perl code you want, you can interpolate in there.
It's like an eval.
Basically, yeah.
Back on line 12, would you get an undefined error or line 9, sorry, if what didn't exist?
What will exist just because it's in one of the base classes of thank you. I'm glad you asked that question because I should back up and say that everything is an object. So even scalars are objects, hashes are objects, arrays are objects. So you've got a whole lot of built-in object inheritance going on, and that's where stuff like .perl and .what come from, is basically the base classes that scalars inherit from.
Also, will arrow operators still work?
My guess is 99% sure no, it won't, and depending on what you're doing with it, probably will blow up.
Won't work as Perl 6.
Well, there is something called Perl include Perl 5, which I hear you can run a lot of CPAN modules off or in Perl 6 using that. I haven't tested it myself. This is basically the extent of my Perl 6 knowledge I'm giving you here tonight. I know a few more things, but basically that's, if I do more talks, basically that's where I'll learn more Perl 6. So this is basically calling foo and then interpolating that into the string. This is just an example of a string constant. You can invoke a method on a string constant.
I also noticed one more thing. You call
Yes.
foo parentheses inside of quotes.
Yes,
You didn't used to be able to do that.
that's correct. Yeah, that is one of the new things.
So just by
With-
interpolating with braces.
With braces, inside the strings, you can put anything you want in there, and it will
What
interpolate.
if you didn't put the parentheses, like let's say, Perl lets you put the parentheses or not for function calls?
Let me test that when I run it. Remind me if I forget, but I'll try it without the parentheses because I can't remember. What's that?
You thought this was going to be easier, didn't you?
No, actually I came prepared to say I don't know a lot
Okay.
because, yeah, this is basically what I know is just putting this together. So there's a lot I don't know yet. So I did kind of fudge a little bit when I said I was just talking about similarities. I'm sneaking in a few little differences, but not the radical differences, just a few little things that are kind of nice to learn about it. So Perl 6 has what's called gradual typing. So you can have num1 equal to 1, just like you would in Perl 5, num2 equal to string 1, just like in Perl 5. You can add those two things together, just like you could in Perl 5. It figures out that you're using it in numeric context and converts it for you. So all of that's pretty similar. So, and then I'm just displaying the output there. And then I'll show you the actual what that you get on num3 when you do this. I'll run it and show you the output. But now I'm going to actually use some typing. So I say my int1, or int1 is equal to 2. Now I've made a promise, this is going to be an integer. So line 30 is actually going to blow up, which is why I have it in a block here. It's just so the program doesn't die. This is the way you would do, normally you do it with an eval and then an if $@ afterwards. Basically, you just have any block that has a catch within that block automatically will attempt to catch any exceptions that are thrown. So in my case, all I'm doing is turning it into a warning so it doesn't die, and then printing that out so you'll see that. And then 38, it's just to prove that the program's still running. And also there's no more undef. Basically, I'll show you what you get when you try to print out the value of what we would, in Perl 5, you would think of as an undefined scalar. So now let's actually run some code. And please forgive any mistakes I make. I just got this laptop like a day and a half ago. I didn't have time to set up VirtualBox, so I'm running this under Windows. And so this is challenging for me. So thank you for that, David. Okay, so you remember this was just interpolation. This is the data dumper-like dump. It's just a string with the value bar in it. The what is,
Ref.
yeah, it's basically like ref. It's basically a string object. So there's,
We're gonna do some comparison, and you say, if dollar bar dot what equals parentheses stir, how would you check to see if you were gonna do EQ? Sorry. Yeah, you're right. To do comparison to the dot what.
there's actually better ways of doing that. But unfortunately, I don't have enough time to go into that, and I don't have that all prepared. So anything I say is probably going to be BS anyway. So I'm going to, oh, by the way, if there's any question like that that I say that I punt on tonight, feel free to post it to the list, and I will follow up and answer all of those. It's just some of them I need to research just because, what can I say? It hasn't been released yet, so I haven't learned that much of it yet. So you can see the foo bar, that was our actual function call, got interpolated. Here's our literal string with the say at the end. Here's our numbers being added. And basically you can see number 3, you remember num1 was an actual integer, num2 was a string, and num3 ends up being an int because it basically converts the string to an int, adds them together, and that's what you get. And this is my warning. Type check failed in assignment, expected int, but got string. The error messages are actually pretty decent so far from what I've seen. So it pretty much tells you what the problem is. I was expecting an integer, you gave me a string. Sorry, it's not going to work. So there's the still running, and this is what you get if it's not assigned, is you get any, which I guess you could maybe kind of think of it like universal in Perl 5. I'm sure there are Perl 6 experts out there that are probably wincing at all the things I'm going to get wrong in this talk, but this is my understanding at this point in time. So basically, if it's undefined, you're going to get any is what it is. All right. Oh, yeah. I was going to take out those parentheses.
You could do a CLS and go back up to the top of the screen if you want to type.
You could do that in Perl 5 too, it just took a bit more syntax. Call a function inside of the string.
Yeah.
It worked. So there you go. It's optional. And let me just undo that. Okay.
What is, does it have a function type, or is it still like a code reference? Where Perl 5 is just all caps.
That's a good question.
Like you stir
If there's time, either write that down and ask me, but if there's time, I'm almost betting it'll be something like func or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but I bet there is an actual type, object type associated with it. Maybe code, I don't know. All right, so let's look at arrays. Yeah, I'm going to have to move a little quicker here. Hi, I apologize for the interruption, but welcome to the world of tomorrow. Actually, Perl 6 Christmas has now been released, and the real reason I'm recording this is not to be from the future, but because we had technical difficulties with our video camera, and so we missed a section of the talk. So I am doing this for the first time, so I apologize if I mess anything up. but I'm going to go ahead and record it, re-record this part, and we'll splice it into the video later. So without further ado, I will talk about arrays in Perl 6. So you can see at line 5 that basically my@foo equals and then a list. You notice we don't have parentheses around the list because the comma is actually the list operator. And you notice, just like in Perl 5, we can put in an integer, we can put in a string, we can put in a floating point number, doesn't really care. And then we just print that out. We say what foo is. We give you the Perl of what foo is, and then we tell you what. And I'll go ahead and run this at the end of the explanation. So one big difference that you'll notice with interpolation is there's no more full array interpolation in Perl 6, with the caveat that there actually is. The syntax is just a little different. I believe the reason is, if you look at line 17, because now you can actually do email addresses without having that interpreted as an array. That's pure speculation on my part. I haven't seen anything that says why they made this change, but it makes sense to me. So basically, in order to interpolate an array, all you need to do is put curly braces around the foo, and it will interpolate just fine from there. So another big difference is that you have sigil invariance, which is to say that before, when you were accessing a single value from an array, you would put a $sign as the sigil. Now it's always @ if you're dealing with an array, even if you're only pulling out a single value. Also, you'll note that Perl 6 is smart enough to figure out that this is not an email address, that this is actually an array, and it will do the interpolation without the curly braces that you need up here for the whole array. So you can interpolate a single value, you can interpolate a slice like we're doing here, and in order to find out the number of elements in an array, there's no more of the dollar, well, actually the $pound syntax would give you the index of the last element of the array, but there's no more syntax like that. Basically, you just call a method elms for elements, and that will give you the number of elements in the array. You notice that since I'm actually making a method call, I do need to put the curly braces around to get that interpolated. All right, now we'll talk a little bit about using types with arrays. You can see here I say my int and then @ints. So I'm telling Perl 6 that this should only contain ints. Well, guess what? The first value is an int, the second value is not, third value is not, but really it's going to complain as soon as I hit this second value. So I've got my catch block within the outer block at line 28 through 34. And I'm just basically catching this so it doesn't blow up the program, and I just warn with the error. We'll see this when I actually run it. And as I was alluding to a little prematurely, if you want to know the last array element, there's no $pound syntax anymore. It's just @foo.end will give you the last array element index. So now one other change between Perl 5 and Perl 6 is push now only handles one value. There's actually an append method for you to append multiple values. So we just do foo.push Larry, and then we will print out the Perl value of that so that we can see that Larry got pushed to the right place. Pop actually works pretty much as you would expect, except with it being a method call. Again, you could have it as a function call instead, and then we'll show the values of @foo and the actual value that was popped off that ends up in the scalar Perl guru. Okay. Also, unshift works similarly to push in that it now only handles one value, and there's now a prepend method to prepend multiple values. So we do an unshift with Perl Guru to basically put it on the other end of the array, and then we dump that value out. Okay. You also have shift, and shift works pretty much as you expect. Not really much of a change here. You can use it as a function call or a method call. I'm using a method call here, and we're shifting Perl Guru back off so that we're back to the original values of @foo. And then also throwing in join as a method call, and basically this works again much as you would expect. It just joins all the values together with a comma and a space in between. So now let's go ahead and give this a run, and we'll have a look at the output values. So you can see when I'm just interpolating @foo, again, it just kind of runs everything together, so not necessarily the best way to do it. Actually, hang on. That first value, was just printing, yeah, because I wanted to show you again the difference between using print and using say. Say gives you a much better display of what the actual array values are. So this is what it looks like with say. You probably wouldn't want to use print for debugging because it runs everything together. So say formats it a little nicer. The actual Perl value, which again is similar to what you get out of Data Dumper in Perl 5, actually gives you the Perl code that you could use to eval and actually regenerate this. It's an array, obviously, and this is where we try to interpolate it without the curly braces. Doesn't work. Here is where we interpolate it with the curly braces. It does work. Here is where you can see where I got an email address without having to escape the @ with the backslash. Here is our single value, again with the sigil invariance. We're dealing with arrays, so it's always an @ symbol. Here's our slice. The number of elements, as you can tell, there are 3 elements. And here is the error that I'm getting, that I turn into a warning in the catch block. So again, I find the Perl 6 errors to be quite helpful. So type check failed, which tells us, it was expecting a type and it didn't get what it wanted. Further, it tells you exactly what it wanted. It expected an int, but it got a string because my second element was a string. And then it gives me the block information to find where exactly that happened. The index of @foo is as you would expect to, because remember in Perl 6, arrays start counting just like they do in Perl 5 at 0. So we've got 0, 1, and 2. Push, you can see pushes Larry onto the end, and then we pop Larry back off into our scalar Perl guru, and then we just display that value here to see that we got it. And then we unshift Larry onto the front of the array, and then we shift Larry back off. You can see it's out of the array and back into the Perl guru value. And then on the join, you remember we were joining all the values with a comma and a space in between. So I now return you to your regularly scheduled talk.
They still treat them like pairs.
I may not actually finish this talk. This may be a two-parter,
That's okay.
because yeah, that's fine. I mean, as long as you guys are okay with it, because I can either rush, or I can answer all the questions and we'll just call it a two-parter. Okay, so basically instead of each, we've got KV, which stands for key value. And then you'll see how these two, 27 and 30, will flatten differently depending on what I'm doing here, and I'll show you that when I run it. So you've just got a keys method, you've got a values method, which do what you expect. And again, you could call these as functions if you wanted. Exists, that's why I kind of led with that special syntax up there. They have what they call adverbs, and this is how you don't actually have a method. And again, I didn't actually research this, but I don't know what the rationale is for doing it this way syntactically rather than just having a method. I'm sure there's a good reason. That one I don't know. I probably should have looked it up, but go ahead.
How would you do not exists?
Yeah, just put a bang in front of it.
In front of what the exists?
No, in front of the percent,
Okay.
because basically the whole thing would return a Boolean value, and you would just negate that. So this is just showing something that does exist, something that doesn't exist. And then delete is also an adverb. So instead of calling a method, you actually put the colon delete afterwards, and it actually deletes it. And then here, I actually illustrate how pairs work. You see, I've actually assigned a pair to a scalar. Because again, remember, everything's an object. And so this, you can almost think of this as a special form of new that creates a pair object, right? So now you've got an object, which of course fits in a scalar, right? You're not stuffing two values in there. You're taking one value, which is a pair object, and sticking it into the scalar. Does the difference make sense to everybody? You look a little puzzled.
Yeah. Are references gone?
Yeah, basically, as far as I can tell, I have not seen references used.
Okay.
Because again, this basically literally, this is actually, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I didn't put this in the talk, but this is a good thing to talk about. Basically, operators are methods. They're just funny looking methods. So that operator, that fat comma operator, is literally under the hood, it's just a method that creates a pair object. So maybe that helps if you think about it that way. Pretty much all of the operators are all actually just funny looking methods. You know, they're like syntactic sugar rather than making you do it like Java or something and having a million chain methods or whatever. It makes things a little easier. So let me go ahead and run this.
Can you talk about the adverb a little bit? Why you have adverbs instead of just
Yeah, that's what the one I just kind of glossed that over, and I probably should have looked that up, but I
Yes,
didn't.
because it's probably has to do with being able to transform iteratable structures, right? So if you're iterating over a hash, you don't want to be able to delete while you're doing the iteration, so that's
Yeah.
like a safe iterable structure transformation.
Could be, could be.
Why
Can
exists
somebody do
Perl
me a favor and actually jot themselves a note to ask me that question? And I'll look it up and post it to the list. Because otherwise I just won't remember. So, all right. So here again, just showing you print doesn't really help you out much. It kind of strings everything together. Saying it here, though, actually gives you the syntax that you would be more used to. The Perl takes it one step further and actually gives you, but you notice that's again part of the reason why I gave that spoiler, is because when it dumps it, it actually dumps it using this syntax. So that's why I wanted to bring it up. Because basically what this means is there's a key named company and there's a value named bound, which, by the way, that's the company that I worked for like 3 or 4 jobs ago, way back when I wrote this, like 15 years ago. No, it had to have been more than that, because it was before Perl 6 ever was announced that I wrote this Perl 101. So anyway, so that's what that is. This is just a different syntax for specifying pairs, just so you get used to it. This is one of those things I plan to go more in depth in, because as you can tell, this is actually taking me already longer than I thought it would. So there's really a lot more depth that we can explore here. It's a hash, like you would expect from a what. Hash elements, that's just me just pulling out multiple values and formatting them specifically. I can go back to the code if you forgot what that was. That was, see, I put in last, comma, first, and then middle. And you notice here all of those were interpolated without the extra curly braces. So this is a hash slice, though, where I just specify all the keys first, middle, last. And it just, because of say, it just gives it to me space delimited. So you remember I warned you about the flattening being different. This way of flattening, you actually get the pair objects. So you get salary and 200,000 or whatever the heck that is, whatever fictional number that is, and a comma, and then, again, each piece together, but it's basically separating them into pairs rather than keys and values. Right here, this is more what you're used to with Perl, and this is where I have the .kv. This is, if you want to flatten it out completely, this gives you what you would normally get from Perl 5. It gives you key value, key value, key value, just as a list. And again, the difference is because there's now an intermediate state of, having this pair object. So you can either get the pair object back if that's what you want, or you can get at the key value if that's what you want. So it just depends on what you're doing. So again, with the hash flattening, you just get the key value. The keys does what you expect. The values does what you expect. Company exists, true. And spoiler alert, I'll talk a little bit more about why that says true. Foo exists, false, because foo doesn't exist. And then here's a pair, a key and a value, right? And there's no comma just because there was only one pair. And then if I ask it, what are you? It actually tells me it's a pair. It's a pair object. So a pair object's a real thing. It's not a mythical construct. It's an actual, real, honest to God object. So let's see. I think I have time for one more.
Booleans, yes.
The truth is out there.
I was writing something today thinking, I wish I just had Booleans.
Now you're going to get Booleans. Okay, yes. Perl 6 does indeed have actual Boolean types. They are true and false with capital T and a capital F. You notice it's just a bare word. So this is literally set to false, and you'll see what each one of these things gives us. And then you notice here, I'm calling the bool method on what a variable that contains an empty string, because I want you to see what each one of these actually evaluates to. So I've got 0 and I've got empty list, right? You should recognize those, again, from my Perl 101 talk, talking about all the things that are false. So we're going to see how that compares in Perl 6 when I run this. Okay, you can, so I said there was no and def. There is, however, a nil that you can use to reset a bool to its uninitiated state. In other words, it converts it back to any. So it converts it from a bool back to an any, if you want to reset that. And again, I just go through and dump out what these things are. You could tell I was really obsessed with the fact that there's no more data dumper, because I think that comments in practically every piece of code. So the one thing to watch out for now, though, is string 0 is now true. But if, well, I'll go ahead with the slide. You can fix that by basically putting a plus in front of it. That's putting it in numeric context. So then when you call the bool method on it, it's going to go ahead and evaluate as you would expect in Perl 5. Does that make sense? All right. Okay, and again, so we set it to true. We look at all the different things it does there. And this one, yay, a fix for system. For everyone who's ever been annoyed by Perl 5's system call, it returns 0 when it succeeds. Everything else in the universe returns a non-zero value when it succeeds. System returns 0.
Shell scripts
So,
return 0 and then
well, that's true. That's true.
Also,
But
leftover from C.
well, yeah, what I meant was by everything else in the universe, I meant in the Perl universe, the Perl 5 universe anyways. So now what you can actually do is say 0 but true. And now this Boolean literally holds a 0 value, but if you evaluate it as a Boolean, it's going to be true because you told it's true. And by that look on your face, I wasn't going to mention this, but now I have to, by that horrified look on your face, you can actually say true but false. Or false but true. I saw somebody actually, he's punching out. Okay, I wasn't going to mention that. Just
no, I'm glad you did.
okay, yeah, it's hilarious. That's one of the truly evil things that I've seen so far. You can do in Perl 6. Yeah, this is yeah, that would be pretty horrible. All right, and I think I have just enough time to go through the Booleans, and then we'll have to save everything else. And I'll give you guys plenty of time to forget everything I talked about, because we won't have a chance to do this until next year. Okay, so Boolean false is false, like you would expect. If I ask for Perl, it's a bool : false. Make sense? So if I ask what it is, it's a bool object.
Why would it be bool : false and not bool dot false if everything's an object?
Because the dot is invoking a method. You still have the : as far as namespaces. Yeah, which that we haven't gotten to that yet, but that's a good question, and that's something we will talk about later. Okay, you can see that when I specifically call the bool method on each, you remember that's what I was doing on all these things, that empty string is false, numeric 0 is false, an empty list or an array is false, did I do that twice? What's different there? I just realized I have,
With a +0.
oh, okay, yeah, that's what it was. Thank you. I forgot what that was. I need to fix that so that it actually shows the plus in the comment so I can figure out what it's doing. Okay, so this is after the nil. You can see that if I do a Perl on it, it's any, and if I ask, what are you, it's an any. So you can think of any as undefined because it could be anything. We don't know. It's anything is possible when you don't know what it is. You can think about it that way. So again, here's showing you the string 0 is true, and again, I should have put the plus in here to show that this is false. I try to remember, or maybe you can send me an email, I would appreciate it. Because otherwise I'll forget to fix these things. And then you notice true works the same as false, only the opposite. It's a Boolean. 1 is true. This is 0 but true is true. So, all right. Well, we're actually finishing up a few minutes early. So any other questions? I'll just decide to stop here because I don't have enough time to go into another slide. Okay, if there are no questions, then I have a question for you guys. Other than me finishing part 2 of this, are you interested in more Perl 6? Again, not that I want to change this into a Perl 6 group. This is going to remain primarily Perl 5 because that's what everybody uses day-to-day basis. That's what I use day-to-day basis. But I just thought it would be interesting to start to explore Perl 6 just so people are aware of what you can do with it. I mean, that's kind of why I got into it, is I just wanted to know what can you do with it. So, interest? Anyone? Nods of heads, arms up.
I'm all for exploring.
Okay, cool. Well then, that's actually good for me because when you've given as many Perl 5 talks as I've given, you eventually run out of ideas, which has recently been a real problem for me to come up with ideas. But I promise I will still do Perl 5 stuff, and I promise I will make other people do Perl 5 stuff. Look, you Mr. Enserling. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good evening.